You're listening to Demand and Disrupt, the podcast for information about accessibility, advocacy, and all things disability.
Welcome to Demand and Disrupt, a disability podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Parsley.
And I'm your co-host, Sam Moore. Kimberly, it is hard to believe it is already April.
It is. It is hard to believe, and it's spring, and all the pollen is blowing around. It's
and
dusty and yellow out there, I hear.
And as we currently speak, the floodgates continue to be open.
They do.
But we're staying high and dry so far. Me and Henderson, Kimberly and Bowling Green. So
that's right.
That's what counts
for us, at least. We are doing well right now, so that is great.
We hope everybody else is staying above water too.
Indeed, we do. So I have a wonderful guest today. Her name is Dr. Kristel Scoresby. She is an assistant professor in the College of Social Work at the University of Kentucky, and she is also deaf. And she talks about cochlear implants, and she talks about her research and applying what she's learned in her research to her social work. So a wonderful, wonderful conversation I had with her. And, something she said got me thinking, like as you do. And this episode I entitled, "Who Gets to Decide What's Reasonable?" And, we talk about that phrase, reasonable accommodations. And
sure.
So, Sam, I'm wondering, has anybody ever in your time, either as a student or an adult working or anything, anywhere, questioned the reasonableness, if that's a word, of
if it's not a word, we can make it one.
We just made it a word of a request for accommodations that you made.
I mean, heck with the Webster's dictionary. We're going to have the Moore Parsley dictionary here in a few years. Keep your ears peeled, eyes open for that, folks. But anyhow, yes, everybody's interpretation of reasonable seems to be different. And I tell you, my college experience at Western Kentucky University was overall great. I'd say 98% of my professors were at least decent, but there's always one or two bad apples. My worst apple was my freshman year. It was a broadcasting class. It was not the intro, but the next one up, which was 201. I think they kind of considered that a weed out class at the time because, if you got through that, you most likely stayed in the major and did well. But if you struggled with that class, chances are you didn't try to repeat it too many times and you just switched your major. But anyway, we had to watch a video of choice, and we were given a list of several to choose from, and we had to write a report about the video. So the first one we tried to watch, it was too visual in nature, and my program assistant Trish, she was trying to watch it with me and describe things for me, but she was like, finally, she goes, this particular video, Sam, it's going to be hard for you to get much out of without being able to see it. And I said, well, I kind of think you're right after about 30 minutes of this thing. So my professor made another suggestion of a video that was more doable, and it was, but it was late in the game when we got access to it. So watched the film, asked for a little extra time on the report since we were late and getting our hands on it. And she said, well, if I don't have it from you by the end of the day, I'm going to give you a 0 on the paper because you've known about it forever. So I went home, my dorm, and worked my tail off on this paper. I had it done about 3 the next morning. So the next day, I slipped it under her office door while she wasn't there. And I think I knew she wasn't going to be there that day. So I thought, well, for all she knows, it could have been there the very night after we talked. So we'll be okay. And so next class period, I went up there to her. I said, I left my paper underneath your office door. Did you get it? She goes, yeah, I got it. And I think I'm going to award you half credit for tardy completion. That's what she did. And shortly thereafterwards, I was a little concerned about my grade in the class as a whole. So I went into her office to express my concern. And she goes, well, you know, Sam, there are colleges out there for the blind. And I didn't say it, but in my mind, I'm thinking, yes, ma'am, I thought this was one of them.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
you know,
that's just a jerk move right there.
It was, but it made me appreciate the good professors I had down there.
Yeah,
for sure. And
you remember her name.
I do remember her name, and like we were talking about before we went on the air. You know, it's funny how the ones that give you problems, you always remember their names.
The rotten apples. You remember,
the rotten
right?
apples. You definitely do.
Would you like to out her right now? Because I'm for that.
Well, I guess I'll be nice.
See, you're nicer than me. I'm just
in case she knows somebody who knows somebody is listening.
I was willing to fight for justice for you, Sam, but no.
Well, I appreciate that. But now she's not even in the broadcasting department anymore at Western. She has moved on to a different school, so I guess I'd have a little more wiggle room. But you know, I'll just say that I got through it, and you know, as they say, what doesn't kill you just makes you stronger. So
I had my time at Western was overwhelmingly positive. I did have a sociology stats professor who was kind of a jerk.
There's always at least one.
There's always at least one, yeah, who was unwilling to make accommodations until forced to do so because he thought any accommodation was unreasonable just because it appeared to, I don't know.
Guess he thought it created an unfair advantage.
Well, yes, that's it. He thought it created an unfair advantage, which is, and that's the crux of that word, reasonable, because it's baked in. It's like, okay, all you disabled people, you know, don't you be asking too much, because already we think having to change how we do things is unreasonable, you know? So it kind of feels like there ought to be air quotes around that word anyway. So I sort of hate it. Yeah.
We could do a whole podcast on the interpretation of reasonable.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Scoresby talks about it a great, she's so smart. She talks about it in this interview that I did with her. Yeah. So who gets to decide what's reasonable? That is the title of this episode because of something Dr. Scoresby said. And she's so smart and intelligent.
Now, since she's deaf, when you asked her a question, did she like type her response in? Is that how it works?
No, she actually has cochlear implants now. So she has a cochlear implant and she uses a hearing aid on one ear. So she can hear now, but without her augmentations and things, no, she is completely deaf. Exactly. Very interesting. But I'm glad you asked that because I am willing to do interviews however I have to do them. You know,
whatever we got to do to get information out of people.
Yes. I mean, she could talk and things and that. But if anyone who is deaf and I did the nonverbal princess. Yeah.
The
Jessica
actress. Yeah.
Yes. And
who typed her responses in.
Right. So we will accommodate anyone. No accommodation is unreasonable for the, see what I did there?
We'll do what we can to get a good story out of anybody that has a good story and who's a good fit for the program.
That we will, Sam, that we will. And so now we will hear my interview with Dr. Kristel Scoresby. Welcome, Dr. Kristel Scoresby, to Demand and Disrupt. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing very well. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk to us.
You are very welcome. I really appreciate the invitation to be here.
No problem. So I did a little introduction of you at the beginning. At the beginning of the episode, we are mainly going to talk about issues relating to deafness and hard of hearing. So can you just start by telling me a little about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I am new to the state of Kentucky. I am an assistant professor at the University of Kentucky in the College of Social Work. And have been a social worker for many, many years, but after being in the field for a long time and was coming across increasingly complex cases, I would try to turn to the research to know how to help some of my clients. And I was frustrated with my inability to access research or even know how to apply it. And so made the decision to go back to school after being in the field for 17 years to get my PhD to learn how to do research. And so I graduated from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville with my PhD in 2023 and then came to Tennessee. So I've been in the College of Social Work here where I am doing research and teaching in the Masters of Social Work program and just having a great time.
Wonderful. Well, welcome to Kentucky. We are happy to have you.
Thank you.
And as with blindness, I understand that hearing loss exists kind of on a spectrum and is rarely ever, straightforward. So tell me about your personal journey with hearing loss.
Yes, absolutely. And you're right. It's not, everyone's story is different. And how not only about the actual, disease itself, but about how we feel about it and how we identify and how we accommodate. Like all of our stories are different. So for me, I have genetic sensory neural hearing loss. So I have nerve deafness. And so my hearing loss started at age 4. Before school, well, hospitals back in that time did not do newborn screenings, and rarely did schools do screenings. But my mother, who also has a hearing loss, wanted me to be screened because she noticed I was struggling in responding and would say what a lot. And so she got me tested by the school district. So that's our earliest test that diagnosed me with hearing loss. And then it's progressive. So I lost, as I aged, I lost a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, until hormones from pregnancy, my first pregnancy, took my hearing loss from, at the time, it was severe. And it just dropped like all the rest. I lost all the rest overnight.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. So I became profoundly deaf.
Is that something that you expected from pregnancy, or was that kind of a
No.
shock? Really?
No, that was a shock, and that was not necessarily the trajectory of other family members who had experienced hearing loss in pregnancy. So I was not fully expecting that. It was actually really scary because, I was trying to seek medical care for pregnancy and I couldn't even understand what the doctors were telling me. So it was just a really stressful time. And we didn't have, phone apps at the time that could live caption conversations like we do now. And there were some really stressful things in navigating. And I was still employed. I was still working and still trying to be a social worker. So I'm a clinical social worker and would try to, navigate conversations with clients. And so having that drop in hearing was just a really, really significant challenge for me. But 3 years after that, and after many, 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 many insurance battles, I was able to get a cochlear implant. And so I am considered bimodal now. So I have a cochlear implant in my right ear. I still wear a hearing aid in my left ear. I have very little hearing in my left ear, but it helps balance out some of the high-tech sounds of the cochlear implant because it can be, high frequency robotic since it's hearing through a computer. And so it's just, for me, I really love having that little bit of balance from amplifying the teeny little bit of hearing I have left in my left ear. So between the two, I do really well in quiet environments. So in optimal listening environments where there's no background noise, I can see a person's face, I can read their lips, I can read all of the visuals and all of the cues. I do really, really well in those situations. But the second you start to implement background noise, or more than one person talking, or the speaker is farther away from me, or has a strong accent, or their face is covered, then my ability to hear drops substantially.
Really?
Mhm.
Now, what year did you get the cochlear implant in?
2012.
2012. You're the first person I've ever talked to who who had a cochlear implant. So, do you want to tell us about that process? That's a relatively new sort of medical advancement, correct?
Well, it's actually been around for quite a while, but it's
Uh-huh.
now considered standard of care.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Uh-huh.
yeah, so the technology has advanced quite significantly, but there's also quite a bit of, I guess, maybe tension, for lack of a better word, between who should be implanted and who shouldn't. And so, when a child is born deaf, there are many advocates who say, let's have that child learn sign language from the get-go. And then there are advocates who say, let's implant that child so that they have access to sound. And then you have this third group that's like, let's just give this child all of the languages possible. Let's do both. So there's some difficult things also when it comes to cochlear implants, but for me, it was definitely the right choice for me because I had been working and participating so much in the hearing world and was used to accommodating my hearing loss, but I was oral, so I used speech, so I never learned sign language. So having a cochlear implant for me has been a miracle. Every single day it's a miracle. The fact that I can hear you and hear these questions, for me, it's a miracle. So I'm very grateful for my implant. I will tell you, it is not a cure, an instant cure. After being implanted, spent weeks and weeks and weeks and months on auditory rehabilitation to retrain my brain to hear. And so, when the implant was first turned on, you remember fax machines, right?
Oh,
Like
yes. Oh,
beep, beep,
goodness.
beep, beep,
Uh-huh.
beep, 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 like these high
Yes.
pitched tones. For me, when people spoke, I didn't hear human speech. I heard beep, 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 beep.
Oh, uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so I had to go through rehabilitation to turn those beeps into human speach. It was a
Right.
lot of work for me, but
Wow.
I was
Uh-huh.
so determined to be successful. I put in a great amount of effort, and it took after about 6 weeks of all my rehabilitation, environmental sound started turning. Like I was typing at a keyboard, and instead of like beep, 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 it became click, click, clack, like a keyboard sound. And then
Mhm.
eventually human speech, which was that was the last thing to turn. It turned for me. So now I can understand it as human speech, but it was quite the process.
Wow. And where did you do this, the rehabilitation work? Where was that done?
Yes, so I had my surgery done in Utah,
Oh,
and the
okay.
rehabilitation work I did there and
Mhm.
at home. A lot of it was through these listening tasks at home.
Mhm. Now, when you're going through the rehabilitation process, and so you have the implants, this may be a stupid question, but do you ever get overwhelmed? And if you do, can you turn off the implant?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the short answer is yes.
Oh, good. Oh, goodness. Because
Yes,
that just seems like that seems so torturous if you can't,
right.
uh, that would be
Right.
horrible. Uh-huh.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, my kids are so funny because they're like, when I tell them, I'm like, you guys are being too loud, quiet down. And they say, just take off your ears.
Oh,
Because I do. I take them off at night. I also
okay.
take
Okay.
my ears off when I really need to focus. So part of
Oh,
my
okay.
job
Uh-huh.
is
Uh-huh.
writing, publications and manuscripts, and I have to be really, really focused. And so I take my ears off when I need to hyper focus so that I'm literally have no sound coming to me at all. So
Okay.
that my mind is just because there's so much listening fatigue that comes from having to hear and having to listen. So shutting off that ability allows me to engage my brain fully with what's in front of me instead of devoting so much cognitive energy to listening.
Yeah. So when you say you take your ears off, you take the left hearing aid, right?
I take my left hearing aid off and
Oh,
I take the external processor off of my cochlear implant.
oh, okay, okay.
So there's two pieces to cochlear implant. There's an internal device, which is implanted inside your cochlea. And then there's an external device that you remove on and off, and it's connected through a magnet to the internal piece. And when those two devices connect, that's when the microphone works and the sound comes up through the coil. and bypasses into the internal device through radio signal, and then it sends the information and the sound down through the electrode array into the cochlea, and
Okay.
it allows you to hear. So that is connected through this magnet of my external processor. So when I can take off the external processor.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. My world is very different. I'm always relying on sound, but I totally know what you're saying about when you're focused, because for me, I hear things all over the house. Like I can be in one room, but I'm basically in a way present in another room. A friend of mine calls it the brain tentacles. You know, it's like just having a brain sort of everywhere. And like, I can tell you where everyone in my house is, what room they're in, and basically what they're doing. Because if someone goes out of a room into another room, I know that. And it's not just like, oh, I heard that. It's like an internal shift in my brain. It's like I'm mapping everyone.
Cognitive energy that you're using, right?
Exactly. Yes.
To
Yes.
know, because you have to rely on all of those visuals auditory cues,
Right.
when you're not able to see anything. Yeah.
And I think it comes from also, I think I've said this before, but it comes from parenthood, where you're always on, you're always having to pay attention. So I think it's an effort to be able to turn that off. Like, now they make, headphones with noise cancellation, and thank God for them.
Yeah.
Interesting. That is interesting. I don't think I've ever talked to anyone about their cochlear implants before. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
How are some ways that you navigate through the world? I know you talked about the cochlear implant. So how are some other ways that you navigate through the world with hearing loss? So do you want to tell people how we're having this discussion now over Zoom?
Yes. Yeah, sure. I employ so many accommodations. So for me, I feel like I'm always on, as far as if I'm listening to you, I am going to do everything in my power to hear you, because the person I'm talking to matters to me and I want to hear them. So I use captions all the time. I'm using captions in this Zoom right now to be my backup in case there's something I miss from you. If I don't hear it auditorily, then I can listen, or I can read the Zoom. So I put captions on everything. It's on TV if I use it, even if I'm, watching some type of video, I put it on. As a matter of fact, I get really frustrated with how far technology has advanced, and there's captions that are free everywhere. When something doesn't have captions, I'm pretty frustrated.
Yes.
Yeah, and I have an app on my phone that will caption things if needed. So I always have backup to my backup.
What's the name of the app? What's the name of the app on the phone? That would be great to know.
There's several.
Really?
I use Otter AI.
Right.
There's a Live Transcribe app. So my mom also has deafness, and she has an Android. I use an iPhone, so Otter works best for me, but she uses an app that it just comes along with the Android, and all she has to do is just touch a button on her home screen, and it automatically starts captioning any live conversation around her. So I use that. I use assistive listening devices. So there's a device called the Contec. There's several different types of listening devices, but I will use that to amplify the hearing that I have. Bluetooth is set up through my cochlear implant and my hearing aid and through my phone. So I will use Bluetooth, which automatically streams directly to my hearing devices. I ask people to move their hands away from their face so that I can see their lips, and I will read lips, and I will intentionally go into a room early so that I can see what the listening setup is, and I will try to sit in the best seat possible. I try to guess where the speaker is going to be standing or sitting, or if they're going to be someone who's moving around a lot, to try to place myself in the best position to be able to see them and have access to them. If they are going to be moving around a lot and they're going to have a difficult voice for me to hear, then I will ask them to wear a mini mic, which is another form of assistive listening device that works with my cochlear implant. So I could keep going, but there's
wow. Okay.
but there's there's lots of different things that I utilize to continue to navigate the hearing world.
Okay, great. Lots of, I did not realize there were so many tools in that particular toolbox. So that is great to know.
Yeah, there are.
You mentioned accommodations. I listen to a lot of podcasts that are from Great Britain, and I don't know why. They just sort of show up in my feed. And whereas here in the United States, we call it reasonable accommodations, they call it reasonable adjustments. I like that so much better. Do you? What do you feel about that?
Reasonable adjustments. I do have to say I do feel a little bit triggered by the word reasonable.
Oh, yes, me too. Okay.
Yeah.
Possibly that's the word we should be talking about. I feel like the unspoken is, well, we know you would try to get away with more if you could.
Oh my gosh.
Is that how you feel? Like there's a mistrust in it, inherent in that word? Yeah.
Yes. I can't even believe that it's simple things in which I'm like, okay, I need this to hear. And somebody can say to me, an employer, for example, an instructor can say to me, oh, that's not reasonable. Well, how do you know what is reasonable for me and what's not, Yes. I will have to say, I do appreciate when folks are open-minded and they're willing to listen to what I think is a reasonable accommodation for myself, because I'm not trying to take advantage of any system. I just want to hear you.
Right. Yes. You're right. That's the word, reasonable, that we really should be pushing back against. I think we're just so grateful to have anything that we're like, well, we're not going to quibble, but yeah.
And we are grateful. Of course, we're grateful.
But
at the same time, I think about Judy Human.
Yes.
Like,
yep.
I'm tired of having to be happy to have an accessible bathroom, right?
Right.
Yeah. And just, yes, of course, I'm going to be grateful for anyone who's trying to make an effort. But if I'm working so hard to hear you, I do need you to make a little effort. And if you refuse, or if you take that opportunity and make me feel like I'm just trying to take advantage of a system, then that just becomes really frustrating for me. So the whole reasonable, I don't see why others are able to say what is reasonable and what is not if they've never experienced this disability.
I love it. I love that you said that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And let me give you a quick example of when it works. So my dean is very willing to work with accommodations. And so I told him once, I said, Zoom's not working very well for our faculty meetings, and I need CART. And CART is a live transcription. So a person is there listening to the audio and transcribing it so that the words are in front of you. So it's not AI generated, it is human generated. I said, we need CART. And there was no question for him. He said, okay, tell me what CART is and I will get it. He didn't know what CART was. So he didn't push back and say, that's not reasonable. We already provide you with Zoom. He didn't do that. He just said, okay, I might not know very much about this, but yes, let's do it if this is what you need. So he trusted me to know what I needed and supported me in that. That's where I think we should go in terms of disability. Is we're the ones with a lived experience. Trust us. If we say we need this, work with us.
Yeah. I think so many times we feel like, I think, I know with me starting a new job or it just whatever, I felt like I just needed to shrink myself and try to get by with what I had. I think as you get older, you're a little more willing to ask for what you need. I would not go back to being college age Kimberly, because I was scared. I was unsure, so those times are hard.
Yeah. And it's really difficult to advocate for yourself.
It is. So there's some terms: interpreting, and then transcribing, and then like translating. So can you tell me what terms we're talking about when we say those things?
Yeah, sure. So interpreting usually refers to sign language. So American Sign Language interpreters are needed when a deaf person who relies on American Sign Language is talking with a hearing person who does not know sign. So an interpreter is needed to translate what the hearing person is saying into sign language, and then what the deaf person is signing into oral speech for the hearing person. So that's
Okay.
captioning and transcriptions. So they're similar in that they're taking an audio and putting words to the audio, but captioning and subtitles is usually associated with the words going along with some type of video. So there's some type of visual. So for example, in this Zoom screen, it's captions because I can see it right now during this interaction that we're having. A transcription is not necessarily associated with a video or with the audio in real time. It's usually associated with after the event has occurred, after the communication has occurred, then it's a word by word transcription of what has happened. So for example, in a court proceeding, nobody in that courtroom is reading the transcription live, but yet the judge has access to a word by word transcription after the event has happened.
Okay. Gotcha. And then a court is where someone is live, sort of
Yes, it's real-time captioning.
real time, but by a human, not by AI.
Correct.
Awesome. Okay. See, now I know so much more now.
I know. All of
And
this technology matters.
it does. It's so much. And fortunately, there's so much more of it now.
Yes.
So much more of it. So that's great. And as a licensed clinical social worker, which you are, what accommodations or adjustments are important for you?
Yes. So, in my role as a social worker, I need to be able to access speech. I need to be able to access what people are saying. I need to be able I can't perform my role to be a helper if I don't know what somebody is saying, right? So I need a quiet environment. I need to be able to live caption something without, and I have to be careful about what I caption because we have laws that protect recordings, and you don't want to record somebody's private health information. So I have to be very careful about what app I'm using, and if it's recording and storing or recording and deleting, then where is that going? So I have to navigate that if I'm working with a client, for example. If I'm working in a community with a community, I have to have captions. I have to be able to have microphones in place of that community where people are uncomfortable standing up and talking or standing up in front of a room, but I need that. I need in my faculty meeting, I need department chairs when they're sharing updates. I need them to stand up and go to the front of the room versus stay sitting at their table where I might not be able to see them from where they're sitting. So even though people might be uncomfortable standing up and talking in like a meeting or a community setting, I need people to be able to stand up so I can clearly access their face and all of those visual cues that are so helpful in navigating a listening situation. There are times that I need real-time captioning that, but there are times where I'm just like, okay, I can hear you. I'm good. So every listening situation is different.
Do you ever get pushback because I'm sure people forget and you have to say, could you go to the front of the room? Do you ever get pushback from that?
I have to remind people every single day, there's never a day goes by where I'm not reminding somebody of some type of accessibility issue I'm having. So yeah, and I think people mean well. They do. They just forget when you don't experience it yourself. You don't think about it. But there's also a lot of people who have hearing loss. Many people. 20%. Most people with hearing loss don't advocate for themselves and don't even make a request. They stay silent. So I feel like I'm not just advocating for me. I feel like I'm also advocating for all of the people in the room who aren't saying anything. But I do get tired of being the only person who says anything and asks for accessibility.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel that pain. You may be the only one in the room you're in, but there's a lot of us all over the place having to do the same thing. And what is it? Advocacy fatigue. That's a new phrase I've heard, that it is real.
Yes, you're right.
And so in your research, you research the mental health challenges faced by the people who are deaf of hard of hearing. Tell me about that research.
Yes, I do. And I had not intended to get into this type of research when I went back to school to get my PhD. But when the pandemic hit, when I was getting my PhD, and I saw after, having hearing loss my whole life, I'm very involved in the hearing loss community and the deaf community. And I saw this stress and anxiety and depression rise so significantly, and suicide ideation. I just saw these after working in mental health my whole career, right? I can see it, I can spot it easily. And so I could just see all of this mental health issues rising. And I was looking around and I'm like, who's studying the people with hearing loss? Like, who's taking note of this? There wasn't a lot. And so I created a side project to look at people with hearing loss during the pandemic and what was going on with their mental health. And that side project became my dissertation, and that dissertation became my entire research agenda almost, because there's such a dearth and so many gaps in our research and our information about people with hearing loss and their mental health needs and the relationships that occurred between mental health and hearing loss. So when a person is not able to access vital and critical conversations, they're likely to become anxious. And when you have a chronic condition like hearing loss, it means you are having these moments of anxiety in multiple conversations, maybe multiple times a day, maybe multiple times a week. And so generalized anxiety disorder is really high among those people who have hearing loss. But that's not the only mental health condition that's high. Depression is high. Suicide ideation is higher among those with hearing loss or deafness than those who have hearing. Substance use, like those who drink, they don't necessarily drink more often, but when they do drink, they drink heavier amounts of alcohol. And so there could be alcohol issues, and there's all kinds of different mental health conditions that are associated with hearing loss. So my research is designed to look at some of these mental health challenges, help mitigate them, but especially in integrating social work and audiology spaces. So bringing mental health into audiology spaces. So audiologists are fantastic at tinkering with hearing devices and helping us to navigate our hearing loss and trying to help us navigate different kinds of communication challenges. But they don't have the time or the training or the resources to also treat mental health conditions that go along with hearing loss. But people with hearing loss are often turned away from mental health providers if they're seeking mental health care. So if audiologists can't take care of our mental health care needs, and if the mental health world is not wanting to take care of our mental health needs, who's taking care of the mental health needs of people with hearing loss? That's what my research is designed to do, is integrate these worlds, create solutions so that people with hearing loss or deafness, regardless of their communication preferences, that they're able to, one, learn about how their hearing loss interacts with mental health, and then two, access care so that they can receive treatment in their communication preference to be able to help treat their mental health issues. So that's what my research focuses on.
So tell me about the wording, the deaf and hard of hearing, and why that wording is preferable to other things.
Yeah, great question. And so, I myself, what matters here, like underlying message among language here, is what does the person prefer, which is challenging when you're outside this world and you're not familiar with this world, because you're like, wait, how many different terms are they? How many different terms do I need to learn? Well, you don't need to learn a bunch. You just ask the person, how do you identify, right? I personally identify lowercase d, deaf.
Okay.
I have zero hearing without my devices. With my devices, I can hear. So I'm in this in-between world. So I don't use sign language, and I'm not often a part of the cultural traditions of the deaf community, deaf with an uppercase D deaf. And so uppercase D refers often to being part of deaf culture and deaf community and using American Sign Language in the United States to communicate. So many people who are in that community identify as deaf, capital D, regardless of where their hearing loss is on an audiogram. If they participate in the deaf community, they identify as uppercase D deaf. But more often, that's profound deafness, people who cannot hear at all or very, very little. Lowercase d deaf often refers to people who have profound hearing loss, but who still communicate through accommodations and hearing devices and use oral speech, etc. Hearing impaired is another term in which, regardless of where you are at in the spectrum, you could have mild hearing or profound. Hearing impaired has been a phrase that has been used previously, but many people with hearing loss and deafness do not like it because they're saying, I'm not impaired. And so that phrase has now outdated, and people continue to use hard of hearing, which I exchange often with hearing loss. So hard of hearing, and that could be anywhere. I have a little bit of a hearing loss. I have a middle range hearing loss. I have a severe hearing loss, but I still very much participate in the hearing world. I use oral speech. I use hearing devices or other types of accommodations to try to hear you. So I'm hard of hearing. So people will use these terms, hard of hearing, deaf disabled. So there's other terms in addition to these ones, but when we're talking about in general for the whole community, we usually say the deaf and hard of hearing, because those two phrases tend to cover almost everybody within the community.
Okay. I think that's helpful.
Confusing?
No, it's not. It actually clarifies a lot. I think defining our terms is important, but I love that you started with just ask a person how they want to be referred to. You know, that is the best way. I watched a presentation that you gave in, I believe it was 2022, about the importance of universal design. And you said it had a long way to go in terms of accessibility for the deaf and hard of hearing. Can you speak to improvements that have been made? I guess particularly in the field of, a social work or higher education?
Yeah, sure. So universal design for learning is based on the concept, this design of universal design as far as for buildings. That's where it began. This man named Ron Mace was a wheelchair user and an architect, and wanted to complete his degree, but the School of Architect was on the second floor and there were no elevators in his building. And so other students had to literally carry him up and down the stairs so that he can even attend classes. And so he created this concept of universal design, in which, why don't we intentionally design buildings with accessibility in mind? And that has carried over several iterations, but universal design for learning now in an education setting is, why don't we design our courses and our classes and our programs? And I teach my students in their agencies, why don't we intentionally design all of these things with accessibility in mind? So instead of adding on an accommodation because we have to, because it's the law, because we're required to, and as we said earlier, someone else gets to determine what's reasonable or not. How about we bypass that, right? And we just say, hey, I want all types of bodies in my classroom. I want all types of bodies in my program. So how about I intentionally design this syllabi so that the font is easy to read, that those who are susceptible to migraines won't be triggered by my, by my syllabi, because I'm using appropriate fonts. For example, I am considering those who have color blindness, and so I'm not using certain colors in my syllabi or in my presentations or in my classrooms, that those, even though there's various abilities with color blindness, that I'm considering it, right? I'm trying to consider what different abilities are, and I'm trying to design my course so that regardless of what your ability or disability is, you still feel welcome in my course, and my course content is accessible to you. So when I said we have a long ways to go for the deaf and hard of hearing people, I walk into an education space, I still have to ask someone to turn the captioning on. Why? It's free, it's accessible. All you do is push a button. Why do I still have to ask for that? Why are we not just captioning everything everywhere we go all the time? Because it's not just people who are deaf and hard of hearing benefit. A lot of people benefit from captioning, but even if it only benefited those who are deaf and hard of hearing, 20%.
Right.
20%, right? So universal design says we start with caption. Nobody has to ask us to turn them on. We're going to start with captions. So in the field of social work, I go to professional conferences, I go to academic conferences. I have to ask every single presentation I attend, every single thing I do. I have to ask, can you turn on the captions? Can you turn on the captions? Can you turn on the captions? And then I have to rely on their comfort level with turning on the captions, their familiarity. And half the time they say, I don't know how to do it. And I get up and I show them how to do it, right? But higher ed still has not learned to just turn on the captions. And that's like bare minimum because that's free. No one has to pay anything for that, let alone being able to build in, a higher level of accommodations. The more for people with hearing loss, we rely so much on visual. Now, this wouldn't help somebody who was blind, but for people with hearing loss who need visuals, being able to put more pictures with text inside your PowerPoint slides instead of just having all content and then you're just speed reading through all the content. Like, let's use our visuals better. So that would be also a higher universal design principles. So that's what I mean by we still have a long ways to go. I want my students to feel like my classroom space is not only welcoming, but that, they don't have to work so hard on accessibility, that they can actually master the content of the course because they're not having to work so hard on just, can they access the materials, right? Can they understand the material? So I build in a lot of different components for my own courses, but I have to tell you about a time that I failed. So I tell all my students, I stop at the syllabus policy and I explain accommodations this disability office has. I explain students to utilize our resources and to get letters if they need letters. But here's also all the things I do to help the course be accessible so that you get to choose whether you use your accommodation letter or not, but that hopefully the course itself still has lots of accommodations built into it naturally, where if you don't want to ask to use your letter, you don't have to. But one time, and so I talk to my students about this on a regular basis, but one time a student approached me and she said, your class is not accessible to me. I know. Your eyebrows just went up. And I was like, what? I work so hard for my courses to be accessible, right? And I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah, it's not accessible. This doesn't work for me. And I was just flabbergasted. And I'm like, okay, I thank you for telling me. I want to understand how I can be more accessible. And she proceeded to tell me about a disability experience that she had that not only was I not familiar with, but I had never seen in any of my reading or work in universal design or accommodating in classrooms. I hadn't seen it and I, didn't know about it. And so she taught me about a component of accessibility that was needed and I was able to implement that. But what was beautiful about that whole experience is that she said, your class is not accessible to me, but you are. And
that's nice.
yeah, I knew if I asked you, you would be able to build this in. And she's like, I've never asked a professor. I don't feel safe asking people for this, but I feel safe with you. And so I'm like, okay, universal design is not about I get it right all the time, or I can understand and predict everyone's ability, but it means I'm accessible, so that I can help with my students, we can build this accessible course.
Yeah.
So it was like a failure, but also a really great learning opportunity.
And you mentioned in that YouTube video that I watched of yours that people with hearing loss are excellent fakers. And so I'm wondering, can you say more about that, and why might someone feel the need to, I guess, keep their hearing loss hidden?
Yes. So, as I mentioned earlier, it takes a great deal of cognitive energy to listen when you have a hearing loss. And so you might be in a listening environment that's difficult. Let's say there's background noise and you're in a restaurant, like you're out to lunch with your friends, for example, and your ability to hear them is difficult anyways. And then you add in that background noise, and it becomes maybe almost impossible for some people. And so instead of saying what for the 100th time during lunch, you just nod, you start nodding. Nodding, you have a fake smile, and you pretend you know what people are saying, and you just go along with it. And we're always looking at visual cues. We're good. People with hearing loss are really good at navigating social cues so that the other person feels like we're listening to them when we really can't hear a dang word they're saying. So that's one way that I mean by we're fakers. But there are many, many people who don't disclose their hearing loss. They never would. And there's so much stigma that comes with having a disability. And so that people are afraid to be judged. They're afraid to be viewed as incompetent, because guess what? Our history says we look at anybody with a disability, and it's not about their limitation. It's about they're not competent. Like, we question people's competencies.
Right.
Right.
Their intelligence.
Experience that.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so people don't want their competency questioned. And so they're not willing to disclose their hearing loss, or they don't want to show that they wear hearing aids. And so they have long hair that covers their hearing devices because they don't want to show it. And I feel like we're fakers in that way too, in which, especially as social workers, like, we're constantly advocating for people to advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
But sometimes social workers aren't very good. We're not very good about advocating for ourselves and our needs. And that includes social workers, other social workers with hearing loss. Even I have multiple family members who have hearing loss, multiple, and 2 of my 3 children also have my hearing loss.
Mm-hmm.
And hardly ever do any of these people in my family ever say, "What? I didn't hear you." Hardly ever. They just go on and pretend like they heard everything that you say. So even within like our family conversations, we all know we have hearing loss, but we get so used to just bypassing over what we don't hear that we just pretend, or we think we heard. And so we just kind of move on. So our conversations are really random at home because no one's hearing each other, and it's like going off into different tangents about conversations. So slowing down and saying, I think we need to do this more and more and more. I think everybody with hearing loss needs to say, okay, I didn't hear you. Repeat that. Or this is what I heard. Help me with what I didn't hear. That the more we do that, the more awareness we bring, hopefully the more acceptance we can bring.
Right. Of course. And you and I were talking off mic that you have 2 teenagers, right? So
yes.
Possibly they're just not listening. They just don't want to hear. I say that as also a mother of 2 teenagers.
Yeah, that we definitely have moments where they're not listening.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are moments where I'm not listening to them too.
Right. Yes, because so much video game minutiae that I get, I just cannot process it all.
Right.
So tell me about the Hearing Loss Impact website, what it is, and why you started it, what you hope to do there.
Yes. So I started building that when I was working on my PhD, because when I saw the gaps that existed in mental health and in audiology, which audiology is hearing healthcare. So when I saw some of those gaps, I felt like there were gaps on both sides, on the audiology side and on the mental health side. And so for me, I was designing this website to be able to help bridge some of those gaps so that it would be helpful for those in the audiology world, and it would be helpful for those in the mental health world. It takes a lot of time to devote to building websites. So I have not had the amount of time that I wanted to be able to continue to build that. So there's some there, and I will build it over time, but it's designed to bring these two worlds together with helpful resources, bite-sized tips, some practical tools and strategies. For example, one of the tools I have on there is an accommodation checklist for therapy, so that a person with hearing loss could just print off this checklist. They can highlight or circle what they need from their therapist or from their case manager or from their provider. They can hand it to them. And so instead of having to explain, I have hearing loss, these are the accommodations I need, which more than likely a person won't even ask for that. But if we can have something to print off and to give to the provider that says, please don't sit in front of a window because the light blocks out your face and I can't read your lips. So if that's already on this checkbox, right, and I can say, don't sit in front of a window. Please have an iPad or computer open that has captions that are running. If there's anything that's really important information and you're turned around writing on a dry erase board, explaining a pattern or a cycle, I'm not going to hear that. Please turn around or give me a visual that I can take home and learn from. Anyways, so this list is designed to just be a helpful checklist for people to just say, okay, therapist, okay, provider, here's the things that I need, so that you're not having to guess and I'm not having to spend all my time trying to explain my needs.
And that's something that you're working on over time, continuing to.
Well, there's already that tool. That tool's already in my website.
Okay.
But I'm working on building other kinds of tools to kind of help bridge some of these gaps. Yes.
Okay. And where can people find that website?
hearinglossimpact.com.
Awesome. Okay. I will put that in the show notes.
Okay.
Dr. Scoresby, it has been a delight to talk with you. I have learned so much.
Thank you so much for having me and being willing to discuss all of this. I'm really grateful for the exposure and for the awareness. So grateful for the awareness.
I enjoyed it so much. I feel like I know so much more now. Thank you so much. Demand and Disrupt is a production of the Advocado Press with generous support from the Center for Accessible Living based in Louisville, Kentucky. Our executive producers are me, Kimberly Parsley, and Dave Mathis. Our sound engineer is Michael Parsley. Thanks to Chris Ankin for the use of his song, Change. Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And please consider leaving a review. You can find links to our email and social media in the show notes. Please reach out and let's keep the conversation going. Thanks, everyone.